thank you very much for the very kind introduction. Also, it put a lot of pressure on us now. So I want to highlight the last part of the introduction. So it's a first rough cut, and also the second part highlighting the title. It's Apocalyptic Encounters. So we couldn't really manage to provide a full documentary that would do justice to all these various and great artists that have been present here and all these aspects that have been covered here. So you can talk to them personally, you can watch the sculptures downstairs. So we really focused on certain aspects. We talked with a handful of the artists and combined these aspects with scientific insights on the apocalypse, on ends, and how this might fit together. So this is a premiere and still work in progress. Also, as introduced, it is a 360-degree movie, so watching it on a 2D plane service also does not do it real justice. So it was supposed to be watched in a VR glass or a Google Cardboard or whatever else you use. So I will try during the screening to look a little bit around here on the screen that you see a little bit of the perspective. But I definitely want to encourage you, when it will be published, probably 1 or 2 weeks from now, we'll publish it on YouTube that natively supports the 360-degree view, that you explore it yourselves, because we're trying to hide also some more Easter eggs and additional information in the background scenes that are not shown here now because, well, it's not visible on the 2D surface. So that being said, we're going to watch the movie. It got a bit longer than we actually planned, so we had hoped for a 15-minute movie and a 15-minute discussion with you. So now we ended up with 25 minutes of the movie. We couldn't cut it further down. It was tough already. So I'm just stopping. We are watching the movie, and then we have the opportunity for some questions and probably 1 or 2 additional remarks. And with that, I'm leaving the stage and try to operate the movie.
Apocalypse is a word usually associated with disaster or catastrophe, but the root of the word means revelation or unveiling. So apocalypse is revelation, but it is also destruction, a revelation that is itself destructive. What is revealed is that the world has an end. For the Jewish intellectual Jacob Taubes, this means that apocalypticism is revolutionary. The world has a beginning and an end. Another world, a new now, is possible. But for another world to be possible, this world must end. The history of coal is the history of this world. It is the history of extraction, of industrialization, of colonialism, and a way of humans relating to the rest of the natural world. It initiates a dependency on fossil fuels that we are struggling to unlearn. It fueled production and transportation. It heated homes. It created a world and sowed the seeds of that world's destruction. For Taubes, there's never only destruction, though. He describes the apocalyptic principle as combining a form-destroying and a forming power. One is always accompanied by the other.
And up came a coal crystal garden. And you can see my experiments here on the table. Basically, what I've learned that during the Depression years in America, coal miners would take any pieces of coal lying around, especially coke would also be good because that is more porous substance. And they would use material that they found in their kitchen to sort of form a solution that they would pour over the coal, and from there would grow crystallized structures, and with them they would decorate their homes. So for me, the binary code between the origin of life and silicon versus carbon, or these crystallized structures and minerals versus the carbon basis, was sort of brought together in these flowers of or growth that is created. And by experimenting with these growing structures, I also found it was quite interesting to be just meeting the life force that comes with crystals sort of growing. And it became quite eerie, fascinating way of watching how they would creep up the walls, like you see, of the container, and also my relationship to them, as well as these living things within my studio. It was in the 1700s that a French chemist was experimenting with and seeing if he could grow crystalline structures with iron salt. And from this, he conducted that iron is needed to grow vegetation. So at that point in his hypothesis, he thought that was the reason that the crystalline structures were growing, was because of the iron. So before they were called depression flowers, as in the time they were used to decorate the homes of the families in the America and the coal mines, they were actually called iron flowers by this chemist in France in the early 1700s. So again, then I'm also bringing the iron industry, which is sort of bases itself on coke, but trying to see other animate, intricate life elements or other ways of viewing it. Yeah.
The coal once pulled from this mine, the coal that is now the basis of art, was not one fuel amongst others. In the 19th century, William Stanley Jevons wrote that coal stands not beside, but entirely above all other commodities. It is the material energy of the country, the universal aid, the factor in everything we do. Sunlight became life, died, and was buried, only to be resurrected to fuel our lives and our world. The end of that world is a difficult thing to think. Apocalypticism operates at the edges of philosophy and religion, literature and art. It is a form of thinking found at the limits of our ideas and imaginations. The philosopher Daniel Coluccio Barber writes that the world is both the given and the possible. The world is difficult to escape. How do we envision a new now, even as the present constantly elapses? Art allows us to investigate the limits of the self, the world, and the now.
Hey, Elliot, thank you so much for taking the time to be talking with us. I know here at New Now Festival you're having a quite limited time frame, so we highly appreciate this. Thank you very much. And maybe we can start talking about this experience here for you at the festival. What is this new you're living right now and the now you're living right now?
I was listening recently to a conversation where they're describing how the present has become like a cause for stress. That used to be, there was an anxiety about the future, that the future is going to be something to worry about that might be different. But now the tension is, when they say, pulling down the refresh on the page and then the now coming. And that's often where the anxiety is. So yeah, now has changed a lot, of course. Time changes. Our perception of time changes with devices, with our culture, and with our lives and lifestyles. Like this place had a very booming life around it. It's interesting to be in the town and see the people who worked here, and to imagine how difficult it must have been when this closed, but also what that rhythm of the city was when it was open. So I think this New Now festival is, one of those first moments after coronavirus, kind of post-corona, I think is vague enough, to try to get together again and talk about what ideas we've found recently and what ideas that we want to test. I think that's always a good thing about a festival, is you prototype how life might be outside of it. right? So you might be very radical or experimental with something in order to demonstrate what life could be like every day. Not every idea works. Not every idea is comfortable or effective, but without trying, we never know. Well, the moon for us, well, for me anyway, is kind of a sign of what reality you're in. So often in fiction, you'll see worlds with another moon, like a different moon, or in stories like 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami, when Ayamami enters a second reality, she sees this second moon there, which tells her that she's in this new reality. And we wanted to kind of make physical this change in reality momentarily, that people can see the superposition of our digital reality and our physical reality in space at the same time and experience that spatially with our bodies by being here in this yard. I think anyway the word apocalypse is somewhat reserved for when there's an enormous amount of suffering attached to it, which is, something that we definitely want to avoid. And although there has been suffering throughout history, I don't think that we've met something we yet call an apocalypse, from the way I understand the term.
Art provides experimentations in living otherwise. Apocalypticism is fundamentally an experiment in the limits of freedom. How do we live otherwise between nations, genders, races, sexualities, species, and abilities? Art can refuse to be limited by this world. Then it becomes a revelation of what Nancy Tawana calls viscous porosity, the interactions between objects and subjects, both human and animal, that are supposedly separate. And art can imagine new relations between the living, the once living, and the non-living. New assemblages emerge, blurring the lines between nature and culture, the organic and the technological. We can disinvest from the world as it is and live in anticipation of other modes of being.
And so what's also interesting with the way I'm using machine learning for my installation that I have been discovering over the last week is seeing and hearing the way machines learn data and give visuals and audio. You can see and hear that intersection of the physical, of life and machinery. And I think that's where the poetry is that I am finding inspiration, and hopefully that translation of the way machines create these new tangible formats that we can experience will maybe give us some kind of like a reminder of what has happened because of machines, and how that interaction of humans and machines has made on animals. In fact, in all living things. But I've had a lot of goosebump moments myself just listening back to when you feed machines with sounds, especially like raw audio data, you get these weird glitches. And in ways, I was listening to these canary birds being re-synthesized, and it sounded like machines killing birds. And I think at the end of the day, I look to technology for inspiration as interesting tools to work with. And so that's how I've been feeling inspired, because it's helping me translate my own emotions and how I'm digesting all this information and such an important part of history.
What is your perspective, or speaking with the title of the conference, another end is possible?
Oh, wow.
You said you were really unsure, expecting uncertainty, but where do you think will it end, or might it end in the future with technology, especially with AI?
This is an interesting question, because philosophically I found myself starting to look at life in a very different way that doesn't involve an end. And I think everything's just this like constant circle of things that go in cycles, and things get regurgitated, and history kind of repeats itself in interesting ways, and everything gets remixed constantly. It's just like this forever evolving, doughy, messy thing that we call life. And I think because of human nature of how we are, I think we will see amazing things happen as well as catastrophic things. I don't think that that's controllable, and it's just the way it is. I have very high hopes that we can do incredible things. I really do. At the same time, it would be silly to be naive to believe that something destructive will not happen. I don't know what that is. It's not something that I concentrate on, that it's not an area of my head that I contemplate on too much. But I think we've seen many examples through entertainment media. But something tells me that it's not going to be like a Terminator kind of ending. If life was to end because of AI, I imagine it would be something so much more subtle, because there's so much data. There's a lot of invisible things that happen because of machine learning and AI, and a lot of the stuff that we don't even fully understand. And so if I was to imagine a catastrophic apocalyptic AI ending, it would involve something so subtle that you wouldn't even see it. And in many ways, I think we are actually already experiencing some of those things.
Perhaps the world has already ended. Derrida writes that the apocalypse is long-lived. The end is just taking longer than expected. Or maybe it is Marcello Tari who is right when he argues that this world has already ended. It exists, but no longer has any meaning. A world that functions, but is empty of meaning, is no longer a world. It is a hell. From AI to climate change, signs of the end times seem to be everywhere. Apocalypticism is a dangerous discourse, though. The feminist theologian Catherine Keller writes of its operative ambiguity. It is a discourse used both for liberation and repression. She also identifies apocalypticism's misogyny, filled with images of the whore of Babylon and virginal figures. Even in envisioning the end of the world somehow creeps back in.
It doesn't end. We end. I find it's a very arrogant, anthropocentric idea to think that, the world's gonna end because of us. It's not going to end. It's gonna become unlivable for us. Like, we're walking around here, this place, super toxic, behind the Kokarai, and there's artificial hills, with moss growing. I saw moss grow inside the tunnel of one of the old mines, Like, nature, the galaxy, the universe has better shit to do, Like, it will continue to evolve as it has done for thousands upon thousands of years. So really, it's not like, oh my God, the world's gonna end. It's us, So I think, if anything, we need to understand that we are in a co-creation, a collaboration, a biological collaboration, with the planet, with the entities, and also and the subjectivity of the planet and nature, because there is a subjectivity to it as well. And also look at our bodies and understand that our bodies are also like a whole cosmos too, from the bacteria in our gut to. So it's really to have a more plural conversation and think about how can we coexist and stop hurting the planet. How about that? It's like, we're not gonna kill it, but for sure we're gonna make it impossible for us if we don't do anything now. And it already is impossible, So like, it's really tangible, and that really stayed with me, before coming here. How fragile everything is, like, I'm saying that the earth doesn't, the world doesn't end, everything changes, that the earth is resilient, but it does take this massive, cataclysmic events, to get rid of what's making it sick. And I'm not gonna go here and be eco-fascist and say that, oh my God, the humans are the problem. We're absolutely not the problem. The problem is what is running in our subconscious, what has programmed us. And I talk about this on my work all the time. It's white supremacist, cis heteronormative, femphobic, patriarchal psyche that is the system that runs and makes us behave the way we behave, and also the lack of checking in with ourselves, you know, and deprogramming our avatars from this sort of behavior. And the problem is that if we don't do this, is we just keep on repeating patterns of behavior that reproduce these oppressive structures, violent structures, to everything and to everyone. And I talk about the femmephobia in particular because I'm not talking about violence to cis women. I'm not talking even about violence to trans women. I talk about violence to anything that is perceived of the feminine, to be understood as of the feminine, the total objection to anything that would be at all in relationship to that energy. So, Mother Earth. If you look at society, what do we do to femmes in this society? This white supremacist, heteronormative, patriarchal, femphobic, psyche society. You take, you abuse, you expect it to care for you forever, but like really, there's a lot of abuse of femmes, you know, anything of the femme. We're here, like it's being absolutely extracted here, you know, for personal gain. And so that really is the core of the issue for me. That deals with nature, that deals with humans as nature.
If it is humanity that is at the risk of ending, not the world, then there is still hope. In Kafka's words, there is infinite hope, but not for us. Or, if there is to be hope for us, we must become a different us. Zollverein is a monument to this potential becoming, not only as a place, but as a space for thinking and creating, imagining the new while surrounded by the remains of the old. Becoming a different us requires new forms of relationality, ones not dictated by the habits of the world. It requires a new politics, what Jason Moore describes as the fundamental transformation of the relations of power, knowledge, and capital that have made the modern world. He argues that if you shut down a coal plant, you can slow global warming for a day. Shut down the relations that made the coal plant, and you can stop it for good. To imagine the end of these relations, the end of the world, is an extreme, theoretical, and aesthetic act.
Considering also the current climate crisis, so there is already people thinking about going into outer space as one of the solutions to solve the problem. And I learned that you are the founder of the Lithuanian Space Agency.
Yes.
Could you say a little bit about this project?
Well, when it comes to the establishment of an agency, it has quite a few layers and quite a few aspects that we can discuss, but you've just touched upon climate crisis. And one of the ideas that I became interested in is this so-called Astro Anthropocene, which defines the second space age, in which all kind of people from different disciplines realize that we've been always part of a cosmos. And when we talk about climate, we have not forget that it has been always in dialogue with outer space and all kind of extraterrestrial circumstances under which climate is developing itself or living on its own. So in my particular practice, I was interested in this current time that we become aware of this situation, but as well as something that might be seen as graphical language of climate change. When I did this project that you mentioned, Euthanasia Coaster, 10 years ago, it was such a controversial project that tens or hundreds of million people started to discuss around about it. I've even became known as Dr. Death because of this project. Even Aboriginals in Australia know this project. But now it's a bit different kind of situation because we live in these kind of eschatological thinking and imagination times, but the very ideas and imagination thinking about something that would be very extreme, radical, the end of all kinds of ends, has become mundane. Whereas 10 years or 15 years ago, it was a bit like something that headlines would provoke, would be controversial, or would provoke, how to say, kind of graphical language interpretation. But now we live in such times that we are being bombarded with all kinds of controversial, that are not controversial, basically, ideas that the graphical language of climate change became not something that could be considered speculative science fiction, but rather was of everyday language, everyday journalism.
The end of the world can be invoked in the pursuit of many different ends. It can be a numbing agent as we confront multiplying crises. There is no need to do anything because nothing can be done. It can be used to justify the exercise of political power. If we don't act now, the world will end. The end of the world can preserve the world that is supposedly ending. Yet there is still an apocalypticism defined by its relation to a beyond, a possibility not of this world. This beyond is unthinkable and unrepresentable. It is the source of a peculiar hope, not in the future of this world, but in its end. To imagine that we can see the beyond is to inevitably reproduce the world as it is. Instead, we must seek to find the cracks of this world and to pry them open, to glimpse the abyss beyond. David Marriott writes of an abyssal that nevertheless appears in the world as an impossible limit that is recognized as such, as what surpasses limited possibility. While the abyss does not promise this or that utopia, it exposes the lie of the world, the lie that the world is all that is possible. This is the destructive revelation of the apocalypse.
Thank you very much. My name is Tommy Lynch. I'm one of the fellows at Capas who's been researching apocalypticism, and it was a great joy to be part of the film. And thanks to all the artists who took time out of their very busy schedule to discuss these themes and topics with us. It was really interesting attending the earlier panels today to see the way that many of the themes that come up in the film were brought up in the panels. We talked about optimism versus pessimism, resignation, activism, and really the challenge of trying to imagine a new now when it seems like such a task is very, very difficult. We only have time for one or two questions, but if anyone does have a question, now is your moment. All right.
So, you just come a little bit to my side. Thank you very much for this great presentation, because they have to, no, you can come to me, just Corona, yeah, so like the social distance. I just wanted to ask, how did this whole process, I'm always interested in processes, how did it evolve? Come here, because they see, you can come in front, so it's just, they asked me to place us here. How did it evolve from, first ideas and then to this, to a concept in the end? Because that's interesting with so many artists.
I guess it's difficult finding words for that. It's like, rah!
That's what I thought. That's why I asked it.
Always quite creative processes, thinking, putting ideas together in places, and we really didn't plan a lot. We really wanted to see what this place does with us, talking to the various artists, and again, very much thanks to all that took part in this video. It makes with us how we could arrange these things, which then leading to other ideas, how they can be compiled together and adding these other texts. So it was really a process in itself.
So Tommy, and the next step,
yeah,
so what's happening
so
now?
I sort of came in and wrote the text that you hear, which really captures many of the conversations we've been having at Capas about the nature of apocalypticism, and really this idea of the kind of operative ambiguity to pick up on a phrase from the film. Apocalypse means many different things to many different people. What the world is it the planet? Is it life itself? Whose world is it? Can one person or community's world end and give birth to a new community? All these questions are things we've been discussing since we opened in April, and all these questions were very much at work in the film. And so coming up with a text that connects to the theoretical perspectives that we've been discussing and connecting to the themes and the answers from the artists was very enjoyable.
Okay, thank you very much. One last question. I wasn't allowed to, but they can't see me, so I just... So, what are we going to expect next? So, what is the plan for the next weeks and months?
Well, you probably should check our YouTube channel 2 weeks from now, I'm saying. We hope we can make that. So, let's say probably 2 weeks from now. And then we can explore the final video with some additional information. And then, of course, you noticed it, again, watching it on a screen and with me clumsily trying to turn around the mouse. It was quite difficult, so really explore it yourself. Choose your own perspective on this whole scene and explore it and see what's in there. So
and then we watch it with 360.
Yes, and watch it either on your computer or with a glass or other head-mounted display, so definitely do that.
Thank you very, very much. I have to continue now because the next artists are waiting.
If I go down, I want to say a last thank you because also to the rest of the team, it was only not the two of us. Eva is here, so also big thanks to you and thanks to all the others.
Thank you very much. One big applause. Thank you very much. So I continue immediately because we have the next presentation from the artists who are working here on site. This is Juliet Kagansky and Juliet Bibas. The topic of their presentation is carbon pasts and carbon futures. They will present their site-specific research on carbon capture research and the development in the North Rhine-Westphalian region, an area previously known as the land of coal and steel. Julia Kagansky is an independent curator and cultural strategist working across art, design, and technology, with a focus on collaboration between the arts and the science. That's our subject today. Juliet Bibas has been applying her skills since 2009 to the digital art scene, creating connections and opportunities between artists, festivals and cultural actors. Juliet is based in Belgium and has been an active member of the Federation Wallonia-Brussels digital arts scene, and in 2019 she co-founded Saloon Brussels, an international network for women working in the arts. Dear Julia and Juliet, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.
It's me first then. Hi, I'm Juliet. I'm based in Brussels, where I work as an independent curator and producer, collaborating with artists who use technology in their practice. In the past couple of years, I developed a stronger interest in curating for public spaces, natural environments, and all sorts of heritage contexts.
And my name is Julia Kagansky. I'm an independent curator based in New York. My focus is art, science, and technology. And over the last couple of years, my research has been focused on artificial intelligence, climate science, and systems aesthetics. And Juliet's going to take us away for the first part.
So we started our collaboration because, like many of you, we've been deeply concerned about climate change and the ecological crisis. It's hard to think or work on anything else when each day you read reports about record-setting heat waves, wildfires, floods, and hurricanes that threaten so many communities and habitats. How do we reconcile the glaring disparity between the devastating effects of our rapidly warming world and the fact that business is, by and large, continuing as usual? We've known about climate change for a long time now, and yet little has been done since the alarm was first sounded in the 60s and the 70s. All along, there has been a latent belief that some technological breakthrough, that's been mentioned several times today already, is coming to save the day, that we can engineer our way out of all the problems. People like to say, if we can put a man on the moon, we can solve climate change. And this kind of blind faith in the power of technology to solve social and political problems is often confounding to us. We wanted to dig deeper into that assumption and take a closer look at some of the technological solutions being proposed. As curators, we are, of course, interested in how artists are reflecting on and responding to these techno-fixes, as well as the beliefs, values, and ideas about the world that they reveal. North Rhine-Westphalia, both because of its mining past and its focus on industrial innovation, seemed like a rich area in which to situate our research. Thanks to a grant from Medienwerk NRW and the support of New Now, of course, we were able to spend 4 weeks here in the region, getting familiarized with the area's legacy as the land of coal and steel, and the process of structural transformation it has been going through over the last 40 years, and that still continues today. Zolverein, where we are now sitting today, and the New Now Festival itself, are a perfect example of this transformation. After serving as one of Europe's most productive coal mines for 135 years, Zolverein ceased mining operation in 1986 and was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2001. Today, it's housing museums, a performing arts center, restaurants, public recreation spaces, and is becoming an important home for digital art with the New Now Festival. With one foot in the past, it turns to face the future and draws on the imaginative power of art and culture to mine ideas instead of coal. These stories echoed in different ways as post-industrial sites all around the NRW and in other parts of the world where transitions away from fossil fuel extraction are transforming communities, economies, and ecologies. One term we heard a lot when in NRW was renaturing. It refers to the restoration of polluted industrial landscapes and efforts to bring back their original biodiversity. Of course, this begs the question, what version of the past are we trying to return to? And can a site that has been so transformed by human activity ever return to a previous state? In other words, can we ever step into the same polluted river twice? Renaturing is a design process and therefore an expression of human intent and aesthetic values. What kind of nature does it produce? Of the many sites we visited, Landschaftspark Duisburg provided an interesting answer to that question. The ambitious public park was created in 1991 on the site of a former coal and steel power plant that was abandoned since 1985, leaving the area heavily polluted. The architect behind the project, Peter Lenz, chose to preserve most of the industrial sites, leaving the polluted soil in place and using plants to cleanse them through the process of phytoremediation. He found novel and sometimes surprising uses for existing structure, for example, turning the former gas tank into a pool for scuba diving. The intent there was to honor the memory of the original site, but not treat it as something static and calcified, but rather as something that changes and evolves each time it's visited. Today, this brownfield site is a popular space for recreation and environmental education, as well as local hotspot for biodiversity. Time seems to move differently. Oh, the GIF is not loading. Never mind, there's a nice GIF on this one. Tends to move differently in post-industrial zones. These ruined landscapes serve as ghostly reminders of a past that still haunts us today, both physically and metaphysically, and forecloses our grasp on the future. Here's the GIF. I'm going to switch the GIF. The consequences of carbon, the fossilized remains of prehistoric plants and animals that walked this earth over 300 million years ago, which have been dug up, burned, and released into the atmosphere over the last 250 years, will continue to be felt by future generations. Climate change disrupts the way we are used to thinking about time and history. There are no longer a sequence of events like beads on a rosary, to quote Walter Benjamin. Among these landscapes, time folds back on itself, creating layers and stratifications like the one in the rock formations we visited at the local geopark. In most of the conversation we had with people during our time in NRV, mining and extraction were typically seen as a thing from the past. We were told many times there is no more coal mining in NRV. A proud, if complicated, period in NRV history and cultural identity, but something that was no longer part of the present. Yet, just 1 hour to the west from here, you can see Gersweiler and Ambar mines still producing 100 million tons of lignite every year. This is a type of brown coal that is the least energy efficient and therefore the most polluting kind of coal on the planet. When we visited and looked at the vast open pit mine, we felt overwhelmed by the immensity of the scale of this man-made crater on the Earth. Gersweiler, which has been operating since 1940, was originally limited to a 66 square kilometers area, where an additional 48 square kilometers was approved in 2006. Together, both sites make up an area larger than the whole island of Manhattan. While we were there, we met with Antje Gerlach. She's an activist from Alle Dörfer bleiben, that means all villages must stay, an organization that is fighting to help protect villages that stand in the mine's path. As the mine expands each year, more and more villages are erased. Over the course of the mine's history, already 35 villages have been destroyed, and a dozen more are scheduled to be leveled between 2022 and 2027. That will displace more than 1,500 people in the process. We also met with Norbert Winsen. He's one resident of Heidelberg, a village that was founded in the 9th century. Norbert doesn't think of himself as an activist, as he likes to say, but he has become the face of the local resistance. He's been fighting the mining company, RWE, for 35 years to keep from losing his farmhouse. His grandfather before him fought a similar battle and lost. The family was relocated to this farm in the 60s, where they were assured they would be safe for the advancing mine. A couple of years later, that story changed, and Norbert and his family have been living with the threat of dislocation looming over them ever since, as each year the mine creeps closer. Germany has promised to fully phase out coal-based power, which is currently up to 30% of the country's energy supply, by 2038. That is 8 years after its Paris Agreement commitment. The transition away from coal requires not only new sources of energy, but also an economic and social transformation. The Gersweiler and Ambar district employ 10,000 people in the surface mine, the largest number of people still working in this sector in Germany today. So what will replace the lost jobs? How will these terraformed landscapes be restored? How will these communities avoid being left behind? We met with Stefan and Gabriele from RWTH Aachen, who are working on a transdisciplinary project called Riviera to co-design the Rhinish region's transformation together with community stakeholders and industry partners, as well as, be with me, Zukunftsagentur, the future agency, the organization selected by the governments to organize the transition plan. Earlier was mentioned this more like a bottom-up type of initiative, and that's the case with Riviera. In addition to switching to renewable energy production, such as wind or solar power, and renaturing former mine sites, some of the initiatives being explored as part of the 15 billion euros efforts include AI research parks, hydrogen production centers, quantum computing, new material research, and biotechnology. All in all, there are more than 70 initiatives being explored, many of them leveraging local expertise in mechanical and chemical. These initiatives include projects like the Smart Urban Skin, a textile facade that could envelop buildings to generate electricity vertically and help reduce energy consumption. We also talked about the Copernicus Power to X project, which explore how to convert renewable electricity into plastic, fuels, gases, heat, chemicals, and cosmetics. And Carbon to Chem, a project of ThyssenKrupp, which explores how to use CO2 emissions from the company's steel production plants as raw material for new chemicals. Technological innovation is so often the starting point for how we imagine alternatives to social, political, and environmental problems. And perhaps this is even more so the case in a region built on the technological breakthroughs of the 19th century and early 20th century. But we are often left wondering, what is the potential, but also limitations, of letting technology and engineering drive the way we envision a post-fossil fuel world? Are these tools sufficient for helping us imagine a future that puts social and environmental justice at the center of our concerns? To explore these questions, we turn to the work of artists who investigate the complex entanglements between human, nature, and technology.
There's more. All right, thanks, Juliet. So advanced technological systems have played an instrumental role in helping us track, measure, model, and see climate change, as we've also heard today. They've allowed us to better understand the dynamic interrelations between environmental systems, to know that the world is warming and that it is warming because of us, and to imagine the future damage this changing climate will inflict on communities and ecosystems. Since the beginning of time, humans have looked to the sky to determine the future. Today, we look to the computational infrastructure commonly referred to as the cloud. Artist and writer James Bridle has been tracing the connections between the history of computation and meteorology. According to Bridle, the very first digital computers were developed for two purposes: to calculate the yield of atomic bombs and to predict the weather. The goal of both of these programs was mastery over the physical world. And as John von Neumann, one of the fathers of cybernetics, said, all stable processes we shall predict, all unstable processes we shall control. In Cloud Index, Bridle draws parallels between the use of data processing, computational modeling, and simulation in weather forecasting, and the way similar technologies are used to monitor, predict, and control human behavior in social systems. The Cloud Index is a series of simulations created by analyzing over 15,000 satellite images of weather patterns and correlating them to 7 years of polling data leading up to the UK's 2016 EU referendum. The work critically reflects on the use of predictive modeling as a tool for dealing with uncertainty and playfully proposes that if we wish to change the future, perhaps we must first change the weather. According to the simulations generated by Cloud Index, the ability to change cloud formations could produce different political outcomes. The absurdity of this claim calls into question the use of computational modeling and simulation for other forms of prediction and control. The desire to change and control the weather, and thus the present and future, is closely linked to the idea of climate engineering or geoengineering, a set of processes and technologies for altering the Earth's atmosphere to produce a more desirable and livable climate. In Displuvium, Swiss art collective Fragmenton explore the practice of cloud seeding, a method for chemically altering clouds to influence rainfall that has been developed since the late 1940s. Cloud seeding has been used to prevent hail from ruining crops, relieve periods of severe drought, intensify showers over strategic areas in military conflicts, or even prevent rainfall from falling on the proverbial parade. Displuvium, with its precise geometric rain patterns, explores the way technology has been used to intervene in natural systems, a controversial practice that we'll talk more about soon. In Asunder, artists Tiga Brain, Julian Oliver, and Bengt Sjolen take this idea to its natural conclusion: the application of artificial intelligence towards solving environmental challenges. The project combines state-of-the-art climate and environmental simulation technology to realize a hypothetical environmental management system. The system proposes and simulates future modifications to the environment that would keep it safe within planetary boundaries, often generating completely unacceptable and absurd results, such as altering coastlines, moving lakes, or relocating or moving entire cities. The work questions assumptions of computational neutrality, our increasingly desperate reach for techno-fixes to planetary challenges, and the broader ideological framing that views the environment as a technological system. Technological systems are designed to be managed and optimized in order to produce the desired results. Today, greenhouse gas emissions, and more specifically, carbon dioxide, have emerged as the key metric for optimization in our efforts to curb the climate crisis. We have known since at least the mid-1800s that a high concentration of CO2 traps heat in the Earth's atmosphere. This year, scientists observed a new high of 417 parts per million CO2. The last time the Earth had this much CO2 in the atmosphere was around 3 million years ago, before humans were even on the planet. Efforts to limit emissions through decarbonization and degrowth have so far produced a negligible impact on global emissions. And as a result, there are growing efforts to develop new technologies that could accelerate the rate at which we are able to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Companies like Climeworks, which is headquartered in Zurich and Cologne, are developing carbon capture technology that aims to reverse climate change by scrubbing CO2 directly from the air. Last week, Climeworks opened Orca, the world's largest direct air capture plant located in Iceland, which costs between $10 to $15 million to build. It will capture 4,000 tons of CO2 per year, about the equivalent of emissions from, wait for it, 870 cars. A great deal less than the 300 million tons it hopes to capture by 2025, and an order of magnitude less than the 40 billion tons of CO2 emitted globally each year. Some artists, like Sean Raspet, whose recent exhibition at various small fires in LA featured a tank of captured CO2 obtained from another Climeworks plant, see potential in carbon removal, even though he has doubts about whether the technology can be scaled up in time. Raspet's collaboration with Climeworks stems from his interest in synthetically produced atmospheres and the idea that modulations to the atmosphere at large constitute a new form of aesthetic production. He sees carbon captured as an important material in the history of human development and believes that the lack of general awareness and understanding of carbon flows is one of the reasons these processes can be so easily instrumentalized and politicized. Carbon capture is a controversial technological intervention into the Earth's atmosphere. On the one hand, many believe that we must urgently develop processes for removing CO2, either by capturing it directly from the air, like the Orca Climeworks plant, or at industrial sites where fossil fuels are burned, which is more efficient because CO2 is more concentrated there. Today, there is a growing startup industry dedicated to finding new uses for captured CO2 with the goal of making it a valuable commodity and creating economic incentives for its airborne extraction. Companies are using captured CO2 to produce concrete and cement, ink and paints, diamonds, and even vodka. Here in NRV, we spoke to researchers at Covestro, who have been using carbon captured from steel gas mills to create sustainable plastics and foams for use in mattresses, car seats, and even shoes for Olympic athletes. Dutch artist and designer Theresa van Dingen has started assembling a material library called Ariel, documenting all the different materials made from captured CO2. The project takes a hopeful, utopian stance and describes itself as a library of possibilities that are emerging from attempts to turn industrial waste into a useful, viable resource and to create a more circular industrial economy. This is a necessary transition to make, especially because our raw materials are finite resources. Looking at this range of products made with CO2, it's hard not to be inspired, but the reality is that even if these new materials could be produced at scale, they would only use up a fraction of the CO2 that we emit each year, approximately just 10%. Since we couldn't possibly use all the CO2 we have dumped into the air, most captured carbon is injected deep underground into geological formations like used up oil and gas reservoirs, creating a kind of closed loop wherein fossilized carbon that has been extracted from the Earth is now being extracted from the air and returned to the Earth as CO2. The problem with this is that the main use for captured carbon today is enhanced oil recovery, which pumps the CO2 into oil wells to help flush out hard-to-extract oil deposits. This is one of the reasons carbon capture is so popular with fossil fuel companies and so divisive in environmental circles. The Earth has its own natural systems for cycling carbon through the biosphere. Processes like photosynthesis enable plants to draw CO2 from the air and store it in the form of trees, grasses, wetlands, and other biomass. The ocean, too, absorbs tons of carbon, both in its waters and in photosynthetic organisms like algae and kelp. It is estimated that about 26% of all carbon released from burning fossil fuels is absorbed by the ocean, with an additional 28% absorbed by plants and the remaining 46% going into the air. These natural carbon sinks are rightfully seen as vital systems that must be protected and preserved. But there is also growing interest in leveraging the powers of industry and engineering to expand, accelerate, and optimize them through large-scale reforestation or afforestation projects, farming kelp and algae for food, fertilizer, chemicals, or biofuel production, and even genetically altering certain plants, algae, or microbes to increase their rate of CO2 absorption. Artist Rachel Champion explores some of these developments in the work Primary Producers, which presents a pebble-dashed landmass punctuated with cylindrical pools containing both wild and specific strains of freshwater algae. The title, Primary Producers, refers to algae and its characteristics as a basic life form, which, although having been used by humans for centuries, only recently became an important subject in sustainability. Rich in proteins and lipids, algae is seen as a supersubstance with a wide range of uses, from its ability to sequester carbon to its potential as a source of renewable energy, and its popularity as a health food trend, such as spirulina. In the installation, algae is placed alongside mundane pebble-dashed surfaces, which are ubiquitous in the British landscape. Pebble dash is often associated with covering up both bad brickwork and the historical detail, and has come to represent the very worst excesses of the home improvement industry. These materials, integrated together as an architectural sculpture, point at the optimistic yet fallible responses to the urgent needs of our society. As curators, we're interested in how artworks like these can highlight the difficulties of reaching for technological solutions to environmental challenges. If history has shown us anything, it's that our tendency to rely on complex technological interventions is liable to generate unintended consequences that have to be managed through interventions of an even greater magnitude. But should this uncertainty and risk mean that we must abstain from action altogether? That hardly seems like a viable option as the effects of climate change intensify. French philosopher Bruno Latour calls for a new kind of modernism in which, in addition to taking necessary precautions, any unintended consequences from human intervention are no longer seen as externalities, as someone else's problem, as they have been for years, but instead become the responsibility of the initiator. Latour urges us to love our monsters, to not abandon our Frankensteins, but rather to take care of our creations as we do our children. The idea resonates with another concept we encountered for the first time here in NRV, that of eternity tasks, or the perpetual obligations left behind by the coal mining industry. Over the course of the Ruhr's many years of mining, the land here sank as the coal seams closest to the surface were emptied out. Overall, the region has sunk about 80 feet. Streams that enter the Ruhr Valley are no longer able to flow out the other side, and now water pools in places it never used to. The ROG-Stiftung, a foundation formed by the largest German coal mining corporation, ROG AG, headquartered here in Essen, has taken on the responsibility of financing these eternity tasks for an unlimited period of time. The mining company is responsible for pumping water away, as well as pumping groundwater across the region to keep the water table below the level of the existing mines. Any contaminated water in the old mines must be removed and treated to keep it from polluting the groundwater. These acts of maintenance, waste management, cultivation, and care stand in stark contrast to the heroic vision of creation, invention, risk-taking, and the relentless pursuit of progress. They present an entirely different frame through which to consider the problem of climate change and how we relate to it and what is to be done. We have many more projects we would have loved to show with you, but we must leave it here for now. Our research is still very much a work in progress and ongoing, evolving, and crystallizing through the many conversations with artists, researchers, and fellow curators we've been having over the last couple of months. Our time here at New Now and NRV has been enormously stimulating and inspiring, and we look forward to continuing to develop these ideas with you all. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much. It was so interesting, and what a really huge package of research. Yeah, you did quite. How long did you work on it? Come in front.
4 weeks on
the camera.
Okay.
Hello.
4 weeks on site, but we started working in end of June, beginning of July. So also off-site research and a lot of reading.
But also, I mean, this topic is kind of an outgrowth of long-term research in climate science. Our focus on looking at climate engineering and the technical solutions being proposed was something that we felt was missing from the discourse in artistic circles, which is why we wanted to take a deeper look at that.
Yeah, and this worked out very well, I must say. I would like to look at the future, because this was also in your title. How do you see the future development of non-fossils in North Rhine-Westphalia, non-fossil fuels in North Rhine-Westphalia? It's a discussion going on. Of course, it's an expert discussion going on. So what are we doing? But you are also aiming at the professions, at the people who are living here, who used to work in completely different branches. So what do you think? How do you estimate the future? And the second part of the question would be, what can art do for that?
Do you want to take it first?
Yeah, it's not entirely our role to answer that question. It's more like to bring people together and raise questions.
Perhaps art can do that.
Yeah, definitely. And we strongly believe in the potential of the region, given the high level of technological researchers, the engineering mindset that's been there for centuries, and partly the political will that's supporting that, the many universities that were not here like even 100 years ago. So yeah, we believe all the actors are in place. Something that is a bit missing in this presentation is the point of view and roles of the local artists, and we've made quite a few. And it was very interesting to find out that they are still a bit shy about, being a local, and for them it's somehow easier to work on a glacier in Switzerland or another mine in South America rather than talk about their region. So I think there needs to be some form of empowerment there. That's also needed in many places in the world, and that's something we would love to support. Like more
support the local artists.
Bottom up also in the arts, but we'll let Julia also complement that answer.
Yeah, but that's I mean, I really want to say this is exactly the Ruhr region has a really diverse art scene, so people listen to it. This is an empowerment appeal,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more I can add to that. I think the question of bringing people together to have these conversations, to engage also with the science and technology, having non-experts be able to participate in that, be able to be exposed to that early on, I think is really important. And that was one of the reasons that we were drawn to some of the work that RWTH Aachen is doing, because they're really trying to organize these citizen assemblies, which can facilitate processes of co-creation together with communities that take into account the knowledge and expertise that's already there, as well as also people's desires about what they would like to see for themselves.
Very important.
And I think that that's a process that the arts can really help facilitate in interesting ways, and also to help support expanding people's imagination, because sometimes, you know, we're limited by what we have seen, what we have experienced, what we have known, and how do we shift that frame of reference? How do we develop the capacity to conceptualize something that is outside of our day-to-day experience.
So hidden potentials also and hidden desires. Thank you so much. So you heard it. Bringing people together.
Yes.
Making their desires visible or at least known. Thank you so much, Julia and Juliet.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All the best. Thank you. I just continue our next guest is already here. Yeah, this applause is for you. I hope I pronounce it right, otherwise you just correct me later. Julianas Urbonas. He is an artist, designer, researcher, engineer, and lecturer. He is already, you could have stayed. It's okay. And he's the founder of the Lithuanian Space Agency. He is a former vice rector of arts at Vilnius Academy of Arts, and now this is the interesting part, a CEO of an amusement park in Klaipėda, Lithuania. It's an interesting mixture. His work has been exhibited internationally, and he has received numerous awards, including the Award of Distinction in Interactive Art Pre-Ars Electronica 2010. It's very nice that you're here as the part of the artist residence at New Now, and you will explore now how salvage punk, a post-apocalyptic genre, can be applied to art. I'm really interested in that. Welcome.
Thank you.
And all the best.
We've got an issue with images here. I've got very new computer with something very new, so it doesn't work here. So until it becomes a bit older, I will just talk. Before coming to the residency, I was obsessed with all kind of apocalyptical methodologies used in arts. And one of the topic, or more specifically, micro-genre in science fiction, salvage punk, was specifically of interest for me for several purposes. One of them was basically my specific issue or problem in my studio. I've got huge storage space for my previous artworks. It's 200 square meters and very, very large, very high, but it's already overloaded, overcrowded with all kind of stuff. So I started to look into how actually I could use previous artworks of mine for something else. And this is why I came across this unique kind of science fictional genre, salvage punk. I don't know if you know anything about this specific genre, but it was quite known around 10 years ago by a philosopher, I think an American philosopher, wrote a book called, I have to look up. Sorry, I'm really bad with the titles. Yep, it's very important. So that book is called Combined and Uneven Apocalypse by Evan Calder-Williams, in which he looks into the current obsession with apocalyptical thinking and imagination. And he defines the genre of salvage punk as I would say, pragmatic ideological tool that digs into the past and present for vestiges of communist and or socialist ideas and practices that worked or still work. But I was not interested in that kind of thing, which might also be seen as a bit anti-capitalist. I was specifically interested in what could be seen as bracketing technique, bringing things back to the thingly being, seeing things as they are, things as things. This has been done in many different kind of philosophical schools in different ways. One of us well-known school, phenomenology, has been using bracketing a way to access thingness of things. But I was specifically interested in any kind of artistic practices in which things are brought to the idiosyncratic kind of mode of things. And I thought I would spend here those 3 weeks of doing nothing, just bracketing things around me. Well, it was not just anything. I brought some previous artworks of mine from that huge storage space I was telling you. I'll show you quickly what I mean by my previous artworks. I brought quite large number of objects, and what I did, I looked into a series of different kind of methodologies that would allow me to turn salvage punk as more like cinematic and literally genre into something that might be sculptural, theatrical, performative, just to get beyond the books and the screens. And I started to look in these techniques as bracketing, and the other two that I became quite obsessed with. One of them was a breakdown, well-known methodology used by Heidegger and other philosophers. You might be aware of this technique of philosophical thought experiment in which you both break down literally and metaphorically, but also you refer to break down as unique kind of induced accident. But I was specifically also interested in another method that is sometimes called as Goethe's meditation. I put certain objects of mine in front of me, and I was sitting in front of these objects for these 2 weeks, doing nothing, just watching these objects. I would spend 1 hour, 2 hours, then days would pass, weeks, until those objects of mine become something unfamiliar, something that I would never have came across before. And then I decided to turn them into, have I already have pictures? Yes. No, I don't have pictures. Okay, I'll try to be vivid and to draw a picture what I mean by my previous projects. So what I specifically brought, I brought a project called Planet of People, a scientific and artistic feasibility study of a planet made of human bodies. This is the very first space program by the Lithuanian Space Agency. First we worked with just the population of Lithuanians. We were imagining what it would be like, what kind of resources we would need to make such a planet possible. Of course, you cannot make a planet. You need a substantial amount of human biomass for a planet. But we were considering just to make an asteroid Lithuania, made of Lithuanian citizens. And one of the core objects of this project was more like a rehearsal program in which we had 3D scanner of human bodies in which people were scanned, and their 3D model of a body was calculated with center of gravity and other things, and transposed into astrophysical simulation in which you could see in a sped-up process how those bodies are getting to each other. I don't know, maybe I should tell a few words on how actually it would work. Because you would need to go into some specific locations in outer space in which there is no gravity, there is nothing. Which is really important to mention here. I was looking for the most accessible equivalent of nothingness. Nothingness at its finest. Most of you would say that probably is black hole. Black hole is the best spot for nothingness, but there is much more accessible, a less speculative spot, which is actually quite close. It is Lagrangian points. And these are always 5 points between two celestial bodies that are orbiting around each other, like the sun and Earth, the moon and Earth. So between these two celestial bodies, there are always 5 points at which gravitational forces of the planets compensate each other, cancel out each other. So there is true weightless in there. So imagine finding yourself there, frozen, you float, and because there is no any gravity, but the gravity is over bodies. I don't know if you know basics physics. Any object that has a mass has gravitational force. Even though it's really weak. But it would be enough so that bodies would start to attract each other. And it would take around a few months until those bodies would connect to each other and create a new celestial body. So this is the very basics of a project. So in the rehearsal version of the project, we had this 3D scanner in which people were scanned, and their 3D scanned bodies would be transposed into astrophysical simulation. You can see in a sped-up process how the shape of yours, the posture, and other parameters change the formation of the planet. And we've got a new version of the project, which is being shown now in Venice Biennale, in Venice Architecture Biennale, as part of Lithuanian Pavilion. So the previous version, which, okay, I can show you. I don't know how to use Windows. Okay. Sorry, I don't know how to control Windows, but just to have an idea, you can see that there were just 6 stainless steel poles. It was quite a challenge to make a quite advanced high-tech 3D scanner in such a way that would be disguised, concealed within these pipes. So the people, the visitors of the gallery in this occasion, they would not know what this object does, what it is. It would be kind of timeless. It would be hard to define both function and the exact time in which it was built. Well, that's another kind of strategy that I've been working on for a while. It has something to do a little bit with Disneyfication. But anyway, the new version of a 3D scanner that is shown in Venice Biennale is different, which is more, in a way, logistically friendly, and also it has different kind of technology. So the previous version of mine was brought here, so I thought I would do something with it. And the first thing I did, again, I was sitting in front of it for a while. Okay. Yep. Okay, escape. Okay, maybe just show a few pictures. I would rather just talk. What I did, I just cut it in pieces, made cavities and connected and made a kind of abstract seesaw objects that might be understood as seesaw, as a playground equipment, but as well it is open for all kind of uses. It could be abused, it could be stolen. It could also look that it just fell off of the structure because above both seesaw objects there is a pipeline which is of the same diameter, so it might look that it just fell off of this. And I'm really happy that we are into writing a request for permission to have it as a permanent installation. But because it's in UNESCO, we need a specific kind of permission. But for now, we are going to be spread around the place. And let's see what kind of uses people would find. So coming back to the very idea of salvage punk, I should also mention the very project that was behind these pipes, the Planet of People, and the very idea of kind of staging the very idea of nothingness. In this specific thought experiment of mine, in which, in a way, scientifically you could see that you can create a planet, but also you can actually, you can come up with a unique kind of framework in which nothingness might be seen as a tool to strip, or not as a tool, as a strip dance stage in which the visitors, those who submit their bodies, they are forced to strip off all the constructs that define the very term human or earthling, like social, gender, political, economical, whatever. Once we catapult ourselves in outer space, especially in these nothingness, in the spots of nothingness, the very idea what defines anything from human to nature just dissolves, because the very terms we use are terrestrial-centric. How shall I properly find this word? Earthly-centric, not just anthropocentric. So in a way, these kind of experiments allow also to at least to get glimpse or close to what could be seen as Nelly said previously, it's a radical imagination, pushing imagination and thinking to the extreme so that you could get out of all kind of centrism just for a second. How much time do I have? Sorry, I'm a bit out of sense of time. So, in a way, you could do it just by thinking, imagining, but I was always interested in getting those thinking processes, as well as the very genre of science fiction, out of conventional means of expression, like books, cinema, like the flat format, the squareness, the linear playback, get out of these means of expression and media, so that the very methodology of science fiction and in speculative thinking in general might be staged, might be performed, and might employ techniques and methods taken from all kind of other disciplines, not only arts, not only theater, performance, music, culinary arts, but also engineering, politics, and so on and so on. So these few examples are my attempt to liberate conventional means of expression and thinking out of science fiction. Oh? Okay, 5 minutes. So questions then. Okay, if no questions, I'll quickly show you how it looked like. By the way, just a quick reference to what I'm doing also in terms of salvage punk. I had this project in which I was presenting Lithuania in Milano Triennale, in which what I did is just a falling, basically, ground. How would you rehearse or stage the very idea of, what's this English expression when you say that the ground just slipped out of your feet? So I staged this experiment in a Lithuanian pavilion in which the public was walking around the pavilion and the floor would drop free fall. But why I'm showing this experiment, just because this one is a newer version of something completely different. It's more like I would say, my commercial line of work, which is a robot used for all kind of performative arts. But the machinery used for the robot is taken from the dropping floor. I'll quickly show you the new version of a scanner that is being shown in Venice Biennale. By the way, if you're in Venice, you're more than welcome to come, and you may just give a shout, and I may be there. I would give you a guided tour. So it is in the church of Santa Maria delle Releti, which means the church of abandoned bodies. So in which the installation works until the 22nd of November. It doesn't show, I see, yes? No, okay, I see. Cool. Can I control it? No. Ah, yeah, I can control. So I want just to show the scanner. So this is the scanner. Oops. Just closer. Oops. The scanner is now based on deployable structure. And it is made in such a way that it would be logistically friendly, so you can just collapse it and transport to any kind of installations. And it has also something to do with, again, my storage issue. I quite often get requests from galleries and museums to send something smaller and even flat. Can you send something 2D to us? I don't do 2D stuff. So I came up with an idea, and actually I wanted to do it here, to find the largest hydraulic press you can find in Germany, bring one of my installations and to flatten it. Well, sorry, I didn't find such a big hydraulic press. Okay, sorry. I'm too late, yes? Oh, okay, so just questions.
I close it. But because you are in time, does anybody have a question here? Not yet. Okay, then
in Venice. You're more welcome.
First of all, come here. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. And then I have one question. Does working with digital materials impact how you perceive and interact with physical materials?
Yeah, definitely. One of the examples I've just shown, the pipes we used was specifically to disguise the equipment, and it was quite a nightmare in terms of making it maintenance friendly. You cannot, usually when it comes to digital arts, quite a few artists think of digital as something that does not need body and tools. Mm-hmm. They imprison themselves in a computer screen until they realize that actually you need to put the computer somewhere. You need a box, and it's not just a box. It should be maintenance friendly. It should be cooled, and so on and so on. And the whole story just begins. And yeah, so what I'm just trying to say is it's not much different from any other means of expression. It's just a different kind of tool with its own peculiarities.
What is your next project? What do you want to look
well,
at
quite
next?
a few. Quite a few. One of them is basically brewing moonshine in outer space.
Okay.
Lithuanians are known for one specific discovery or achievement. We are the very first who grew a plant from seed to seed, full life cycle. Because during the Soviet times, many people think that it was Russians, but it is not. So I'm working with pioneers of astrobotany to make certain
how is it called?
Extraterrestrial vodka, moonshine, astrobotany.
Astrobotany.
Yeah, so we are working on earthly but extraterrestrial circumstances here on Earth and growing certain plants and then making vodka out of them.
Very good. Okay,
yes.
That's a great project. One applause for Juliana.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And see you later.